Have you ever been challenged to make a tough decision, one that seemed to go against everything you hold dear? In this video, we're diving into the story of Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac, one of the greatest tests of faith in human history. It's not just about the act itself, but about how unshakable trust in something greater can transform even the most desperate situations. If you've ever faced moments where life demanded more from you than you thought you could give, this video will show you how faith can change everything. Watching this story will give you a new perspective on how to handle life's challenges. You'll see that even when everything seems hopeless, there's always a greater purpose working in your favor. So stick around and discover how this story can bring more strength and hope to your journey. Abraham was at peace when he received an unexpected call from God, a moment that must have made his heart skip a beat. The command was clear but unimaginable: sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Anyone would have been paralyzed by such a demand, but Abraham, he stayed firm even though the weight of it must have been almost unbearable. After all, how do you obey something so difficult when what's at stake is your most precious gift? In silence, without revealing his inner turmoil, he made his decision. There was no resistance or questioning. It was as if, in that moment, Abraham was testing the very limits of his faith. His heart may have been heavy, but his trust in God was louder. Abraham's silence wasn't indifference, it was pure obedience. He understood that, despite everything, there was a greater purpose. Each step toward the painful task was filled with thoughts, memories, and a deep pain. As a father, his love for Isaac consumed him, but his loyalty to God guided him. The conflict between faith and paternal love made the situation even more complex. But Abraham had made up his mind. Was he afraid? Absolutely. But that fear wasn't stronger than his trust in God. And so what seemed impossible to accept was in motion. Abraham moved, but his heart wavered between anguish and the hope that somehow God would provide an unexpected solution. This was a test of faith like no other, and even without knowing the outcome, Abraham was willing to go through with it. After all, he knew that true faith often demands unimaginable sacrifices. Abraham and Isaac walked together in silence, heading toward Mount Moriah. Each step echoed the weight of the task Abraham carried in his heart, while Isaac, unaware of what was coming, walked beside his father, trusting him completely. The silence between them was almost tangible, and Abraham, lost in his thoughts, struggled to maintain his composure. It wasn't just a physical journey. It was a walk of faith and inner turmoil. As they climbed the mountain, Abraham's mind was flooded with memories of Isaac. He remembered his son's first smiles, their joyful conversations, and how much he loved him. This fatherly love made everything more painful. But even though his soul wanted to scream, Abraham kept going, knowing he had to trust in the divine plan even if he couldn't fully understand it. Isaac, on the other hand, quietly observed his father. He carried the wood on his back, unaware that he would be the sacrifice. Something felt strange about the trip, but his respect for his father kept him from asking too many questions. The silence between them was filled with mutual trust, though overshadowed by hidden pain. As they neared their destination, the tension grew heavier. Abraham felt the weight of uncertainty and faith colliding within him. He was about to do the unthinkable, and the path seemed longer and harder with every step. Deep down, he hoped for a miracle, something that would break the painful silence with an answer. But the silence remained, and the mountain loomed closer. The pivotal moment had arrived. Abraham, with trembling hands and a racing heart, began preparing the altar at the top of Mount Moriah. Each stone he placed seemed heavier than the last, as if the very earth understood the gravity of what was about to happen. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of his slow, deliberate movements. Isaac, still unaware, watched his father with innocent eyes, not realizing that he was the intended sacrifice. When the altar was ready, Abraham bound Isaac with silent tears hidden behind his unwavering obedience. Isaac, now realizing what was happening, did not resist. There was a mutual surrender in that moment, Abraham to his God, Isaac to his father. The suspense was palpable. Abraham raised the knife, but before he could complete the act, a voice interrupted the silence. "Do not lay a hand on the boy." The relief that swept over Abraham was like a powerful wave, washing away the immense burden he had been carrying. The angel of the Lord had spoken, stopping the sacrifice at the last possible moment. God's love had intervened, and the test of faith was complete. Abraham looked to the side and saw a ram caught in the thicket, sent by God to be sacrificed in place of his son. Divine provision had come just in time. The sacrifice was interrupted, but the impact of that moment would never be forgotten. With a heart full of gratitude, Abraham offered the ram in place of Isaac, knowing that his act of faith had been seen and recognized. This wasn't just a test of obedience. It was a covenant of trust between Abraham and God, a bond that would endure for generations. The weight of that experience would stay with Abraham forever. He had proven both to himself and to God that his faith was unshakable. The sacrifice he didn't have to make revealed something much greater. Abraham's trust in God was absolute, and for that, he was rewarded in extraordinary ways. It wasn't just a promise of personal blessing, it was something far beyond that. God assured him that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Not only was Isaac's life spared, but the promise of Abraham's future lineage was renewed. It was the kind of reward that only true faith could bring. After this experience, Abraham understood that God always had a purpose, even in the most difficult and incomprehensible moments. His absolute trust in something greater, though painful, led to a future filled with hope and abundance. Isaac, too, was forever changed by that moment. He was the living testimony of a faith that moves mountains, a faith that defies the impossible. The bond between father and son would never be the same again, as they had shared something that transcended human understanding. It was as though that unmade sacrifice had built a bridge of faith between them and God, something unbreakable and powerful. And so, the story of Abraham and Isaac would echo through generations, not just as an example of faith and obedience, but as a reminder that when we trust fully, God will always provide. The impact of that moment changed the course of history and shaped the understanding of faith, leaving a legacy of unwavering trust that would inspire many to follow the same path. Now that you've heard this powerful story, the question remains: what are you willing to sacrifice to keep your faith unshakable? In moments of difficulty, could you also trust that there's a greater plan at work? Abraham's lesson shows us that true faith gives us the strength to face any challenge, no matter how impossible it may seem. And if you start applying that kind of trust in your life now, imagine how it could transform your choices and your future. So, why not give it a try? Take this reflection and see how it applies to your daily struggles. And of course, don't forget to share your experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear what you're going through and how this story can help. If this content was helpful to you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep learning more about topics like this. And don't miss the next video, where we'll discuss an epic battle. Who would win in a fight, Samson or David? I bet you'll be surprised.